Tesla is far ahead in self-driving cars, but every single car someday will have to have autonomous capability.
And that's the key. There are many people who say, I'd like to go electric at some point. Not entirely comfortable with that at this point.
There's more used vehicles that are almost at parity in some cases with a new vehicle.
Now the EU is sort of prepping their tariffs. They're going to release those in 2 weeks. And those are the cars that are coming from China into the European Union.
Really the only EV choice for years in the US has been Tesla. And in the EU, you've got a bunch of alternatives now.
Because for the last few years, Tesla advantage is just unparalleled.
All that and more. So let's get to it. Oh, that's not what I wanted, but congratulations to the earnings for NVIDIA, JENSEN, and crew. Something tells me they've got some more room to grow. While what they're doing is quite impressive, it will pale in comparison to what those applications for those chips actually do, and ultimately what they're worth.
You mentioned that automotive is now the largest vertical, enterprise vertical within data center. You talked about the Tesla business, but what is that all about? Is it self-driving among other automakers too? Are there other functions that automakers are using within data center? Help us understand that a little bit better.
Well, Tesla is far ahead in self-driving cars. But every single car someday will have to have autonomous capability. It's safer, it's more convenient, it's more fun to drive. And in order to do that, it is now very well known, very well understood, that learning from video directly is the most effective way to train these models. We used to train based on images that are labeled. We would say, this is a car, this is a car, this is a sign, this is a road, and we would label that manually. It's incredible. And now we just put video right into the car and let the car figure it out by itself.
Prime example would be Tesla, who are using those NVIDIA chips in order to solve for autonomy. There is plenty of money to be made with the picks and shovels. NVIDIA is currently selling the tools to mine for that gold. Tesla is currently up in the pre-market a little over 1%, sitting at $182 per share. It is my belief that autonomous driving will be a eureka moment, much like tapping into a gold deposit that seems quite infinite. Solving for a generalized autonomy for the robots on 4 wheels will undoubtedly lead to the ones walking around on 2 legs. Investing in the mining equipment is nice, but I'd rather have the investment in the gold.
The average age of vehicles in the United States reaching an all-time high. Phil LeBeau joins us with more right now. Hey, Phil, what's the story?
Becky, take a look at this chart because this is a snapshot of the American vehicles that are out on the road right now. And you're seeing that vehicles are now at an all-time high in terms of the average age. 12.6 years, according to S&P Global Mobility. And again, they've never been higher than this.
Me personally, I don't think I've ever held onto a vehicle longer than 5 years. The average is a preteen? That means there are individuals that are holding on to cars 15, 16 years even? I can't say much. The goal is to have Panda for as long as we possibly can. And I suppose if we can make it to 2035, 2036 with the same battery electric vehicle, all paid off, still reliable, and still highly fashionable, I guess we could consider that a win. How often are you switching out vehicles?
I think there's still a lot of wait and see on if you want to jump into the electric market or kind of wait to see how the infrastructure and everything develops.
And that's the key. There are many people who say, I'd like to go electric at some point. Not entirely comfortable with that at this point. Here's a breakdown of the average ages and these 3 buckets here.
Well, a new report from Cars Commerce is highlighting recent shifts in the auto industry that point to some stabilization and more consumer choice across new, used, and electric vehicle sectors. Here with more, we've got Rebecca Lindland, who is the Cars Commerce Senior Director of Industry Data and Insights. Great to see you here, and thanks for hopping on the show with us, Rebecca. It has been a volatile year for autos. Is that going to be easing or normalizing here in the near term?
You know, it's been actually a volatile 5 years, frankly, for the automotive space. But we do see some signs of stabilization. So when we look at particularly month over month, when we look at year over year, we are still seeing some large swings, but we're grateful to see some stabilization here. One of the things that kind of keeps popping up and we look at and say, this is our new normal, is high car prices. So the average new car is running at about $49,000. That's up from around $37,000 in 2019. So we are seeing these huge increases. And what we're not seeing is any kind of erosion in those prices.
$45,000, and that's without the $7,500 tax credit and the gas savings that you'll have. When we click on that tab, your savings could easily come down to less than $35,000. Price problem solved. Not to mention that sweet 0.99% interest rate.
What does it seem in the calculus for purchasing a car right now for consumers out there that are in the market? There were times even within these past 5 years where it made more sense to purchase a new vehicle versus a used one because of the lifetime value that you would perhaps get out of that deal instead of going used. What is the kind of mix of the thought process right now?
I think that we're seeing consumers that are shopping both for new and used. There's a lot more overlap these days when it comes to pricing of used vehicles, because used vehicles have also increased by over 30%. So there's more used vehicles that are almost at parity in some cases with a new vehicle. The best thing in my mind is for a consumer to go to a site like cars.com. You can do some of the tools like payment calculators to figure out what really suits your budget. Keeping in mind that we're seeing a bit of a shortage on the used car side with newer used vehicles, because as you said, more people are keeping their car longer and fewer people are turning in their leased vehicles. So we're really seeing a shortage. We had softer sales in new car, and that's feeding into a shortage in used vehicles as well.
You would think with that information, a limited supply of used vehicles, used Teslas should probably be worth more. But I refer you back to Exhibit A. If you could purchase a Model Y brand new for damn near the same price you can get the average used car, this ain't rocket science, you're gonna buy the brand new Model Y. That, in turn, will lower the price for the used Teslas on the market. I've always said that the prices for Teslas will be determined by how much demand that they have. Elon has said that this year, Tesla will experience considerably less growth than the previous year. Between now and this time next year, I fully expect the prices to go up considerably. This in turn will lift the prices of the used Tesla market. My advice, if you find a used Tesla, scoop that up, especially if it already has something on it like FSD. Because while the demand situation may appear murky at the moment, it's not gonna take all day for people to recognize sunshine. And once the order starts significantly outstripping the demand that Tesla has already said will be limited for the time being, there is only one direction in which the prices will go, and that's up.
How much does the U.S. actually sell to China?
Yeah, so this is the big story. Obviously, Biden came out with his tariffs from the Chinese cars going over to the U.S., and really the big story there is that, in fact, they don't sell many cars in the United States, right?
Not yet. Not yet.
Now the EU is sort of prepping their tariffs. They're going to release those in 2 weeks. And those are the cars that are coming from China into the European Union. And that is much more significant for China. So what China is saying is now, listen, if you do that, we are going to retaliate. We're going to hit these big engine cars. And a lot of these cars, the big, most highest margin cars that you see in Stuttgart from Mercedes-Benz, the big Maybachs with huge cylinder engines, those are made here and sent over to China. If you put a 25% tariff there, that is going to be meaningful. It's going to have a meaningful impact on their bottom line.
I mean, so Tesla is also struggling with sales in Europe, but Tesla's big bet was also on China just a couple of months ago.
Yeah, correct. So Tesla has production both in Europe and in China, but actually a third or a fourth of the cars from Tesla that they sell in Europe come from China. So this is another one that's going to be caught in the crosshairs. And we just got this sort of monthly data from Tesla. Their sales are going down. They're actually losing market share here in Europe, particularly when they were used to be the only game in town. They no longer are. So they're sort of losing momentum here in Europe.
Oh man, this is quite sensational. Registrations dropped 2.3% to less than 14,000 in a single month. Oh no! Look out! The competition is coming! Look, people, Tesla cannot do this themselves. Other battery electric car sales rose 14% in Europe. That is a very, very good thing. If you're building the best battery electric vehicle on the planet, the only manufacturer that's making any profit worth mentioning on it, something tells me the registrations for the month of April aren't going to amount to a hill of beans in 2030.
Tesla's seen a bit of weakness overseas with the worst month for EU sales since January of 23. Pretty different picture in China, though. XPeng driven higher by some strong sales in its latest results. Our next guest does warn that a Chinese monopoly in the EV market could threaten the country's economic security. Joining us here at Post 9 is DVX Venture CEO John McNeil, also a former president at Tesla and presently a board member at GM and Lulu. It's great to have you in, John. Thanks for coming. What do we make of the EU registrations? Is it telling us something about the market or the company or share or something else?
I think it may be a picture of what's to come, because in the EU, you've got a lot of competition. And so really the only EV choice for years in the US has been Tesla. And in the EU, you've got a bunch of alternatives now from all the big makers, and they're gaining share against Tesla. So you see Tesla's registrations down, but EV registrations overall up. So Tesla's losing share in that space.
Is the difference the competition from China in the EU?
There is some competition from China and EU. Clearly, BYD is there in a big way, but it's also really strong competition from the European makers and the Scandinavian makers, including Volvo.
EV market share is a funny thing. I mean, if I'm the only game in town and somebody else comes out of nowhere, sells one item, just one, I will inherently lose market share. It's simple mathematics. The only thing that really, truly matters is the internal combustion engine market share versus the EV market share. Tesla is selling the most battery electric vehicles on the planet, and they're only going to produce around 2 million this year. Like I've said, Tesla cannot do this on their own. We need more EV sales, not only in Europe, but in the US and China. The internal combustion engine is still dominant around the globe. Eventually, all of these EVs is going to have the North American charging standard on it, and those that wish to survive the decade will more than likely have Tesla's FSD software on it as well. All of which will produce a shot in the arm for Tesla's revenue.
So what happens now, especially in light of a recent quarterly call where Elon says, if you're in the stock for being in the car business, you might want to look elsewhere. He means that.
I think he does. Yeah, he's going all chips in on autonomy, and I think he sees that competitive battle coming, and the battle may not be EVs in the future, maybe shifting to autonomous vehicles or AVs.
What? If you have autonomous vehicles, it only makes sense that they're going to be EVs. AVs? What are we talking about here, John?
Why? What happened to the EV future?
I think the EV future is alive and well. It's a $70 billion business already in the U.S. And when you combine the EV sales, the new car EV sales, with the used car EV sales in the first quarter, remember, Hertz unloaded tens of thousands of EVs on the market. Used EV sales shot up 45% as a result.
I wonder what that says about the demand.
And so when you add new and used, you've got significant EV demand. And that'll shift. It'll rotate back to new EV demand as that one-time event.
You think so?
Because
there are questions about whether
there are questions, but when you look, like EV demand was up again in April. And that doesn't include the used cars. So once the used cars sort of dry up, that demand will rotate back to new.
Can you talk about what optionality exists now at GM regarding the ICE business or the EV business?
So it's nice at GM to have both options. Have the ICE business funding the transition to EV. And on the EV side, they've got EVs in the $20,000 to $30,000 range, $30,000 to $40,000 range that are just coming to market literally this month. And so now we're going to see a real alternative where after tax incentive, you've got a $29,500 Equinox. It's a really nice car, and a lot of us have been driving it and have fallen in love with it. It's 310 miles of range for that price.
Boy, I hope he's right. Again, Tesla cannot do this by themselves. The main question is, will you buy the EV Equinox, or will consumers still buy the internal combustion engine? There is a huge conflict of interest here. If the EV Equinox is better, why sell the internal combustion engine variant? I'll tell you why. Because to GM, Ford, there is no difference between the ICE and the EV. It's a lateral move based on the preference of the consumer. Get the f*** out of here. Until the legacy auto manufacturers realize that they're not making the battery electric vehicles as best as they can, continue to sell hybrids and internal combustion engines of the same makes and models of their EVs, they're going to continue to have negative margins and lackluster sales. People don't want EVs, they want Teslas.
There's a couple of big names that stand out from this report, Howard. I'll zoom in on rather unexpectedly, of course, Tesla. Look, that top of the list for you, interesting in terms of the EV space. On some levels, not surprising, but on other levels, it is surprising. We know they've been cutting prices. They're challenged in the Chinese market. We know EV growth is slowing. The stock is down about 30% year to date. How sustainable is the leadership at Tesla and their ability to continue to invest at this level on things like R&D?
Well, your observation is spot on, Tom, because for the last few years, Tesla advantage is just unparalleled. This year, for the first time, its advantage is basically almost completely eroded, except for perhaps AI. What we are seeing in the report is BYD and other car players, in terms of the relative score, they really have improved dramatically this year, meaning the top has been crowded out. The biggest implication is the smaller player, the lower on our ranking, they become increasingly vulnerable. Because after all, that EV transition and AI and software requires so much CapEx investment. If you're not big enough, it's very hard to make that transition.
I believe those future readiness scores cap out at 100. When you're thinking about it realistically, I would say Tesla is 150, and then BYD is next in line at 78. There is no EV manufacturer challenging Tesla for their dominance. And that's okay, because the real competition lies with the internal combustion engine. All of these battery electric vehicles should be looking to replace their internal combustion engine variant. These are effectively computers on wheels. Equipped with the NACS and licensing Tesla's FSD, these vehicles will play an important role in mobility in the future. The higher the EV market share compared to that of the internal combustion engine, which, let's be honest, is going to erode more rapidly than people think, is all that matters. The more EVs on the roads, the more Tesla will benefit. In conclusion, US consumers are holding onto their cars much longer than I ever have. Damn near 13 years? And EV demand in the US is up despite all of this volatility. If you add in the used cars that Hertz dumped onto the market, it's up significantly. And Tesla is losing market share in Europe, so I guess they should just pack up the Giga Berlin factory and take their talents elsewhere. Right? No? They should keep building cars in Europe? Oh, yeah, they're probably fine. China is hinting at a tariff of their own. We'll have to wait and see how Europe responds to the Chinese invasion of automobiles into their own country. But something tells me it's not going to stop the Chinese OEMs from being in Europe. And no auto manufacturer's future readiness can hold a candle to Tesla. What did Elon Musk say so long ago, that second place should have to see us from a telescope? With Tesla's manufacturing and technological lead, I believe that is the case. That's all I've got for you today. Be easy. Peace.